Hello everybody, Sparkster1701 here. We're taking a look at another one of the Decepticon commandos. This time around, it's Ro-Tor. Ro-Tor would be released in 2001 with the other Decepticon commandos, although in Japan he would be released the year prior and would be called Heptor. And he would look exactly like this, except for one differing feature, which we'll cover on his vehicle mode. He would also be released again later in 2003 in either urban or desert camouflage colors as part of multi-pack exclusives to Walmart. Now, as we all can tell, Ro-Tor is obviously a helicopter, and he is a repaint of the Combaticon character, Vortex. So, how does he compare to Vortex, really? In a lot of ways, he doesn't. Vortex was a sinister character, primarily due to the fact that he was an interrogator. He was basically an upgrade over Laserbeak, as he had considerably more courage than Laserbeak, so he wasn't threatened as easily. Plus, he was also known for taking Autobots or other captives on wild, dizzying helicopter rides, and then once he got what he wanted from them, he'd drop them from wherever they happened to be flying at the moment. Ro-Tor, however, enjoys sniping at ground-based targets from in the air, and comes off as very arrogant in his nature, so he has more in common with Blastoff than he does with Vortex, surprisingly enough. Plus, of course, he also seems to, from his bio, have a little bit more, like, ninja training, as supposedly he can remove the large rotor from his backside and uses it like a shuriken throwing star. And he also is apparently able to use this other blade here as a personal defense weapon. Something that was not mentioned for Vortex. Although I imagine a lot of us played with Vortex in that way, that he had that as an optional weapon. Whether or not we used the giant one as a throwing star or whatever, depended on if we realized that we could remove the rotor blade. At any rate, let's take a look at Ro-Tor's articulation, and he has the exact same articulation that was available on Vortex. His arms could rotate at the shoulder all the way. You just had to be careful of the blade. You also could, since his arm was on a ball joint, you could stick his arm out about so far, and it could raise up just as well. So he had quite a range of motion on his arms. And you could bend his legs at the knees, like so, to put him in a kneeling position. But unfortunately, he's a little bit top-heavy, so you have to get him back far enough that he doesn't fall flat on his face. So, not bad for Ro-Tor. Okay, to transform Ro-Tor, first off, we've got to remove him of all of his weapons. Of course, to transform him, we fold his arms out to the side and flip these tail pieces out from under the arms. Rotate them like so, so that the red portion points upward. and then bring them up over his head and connect them, and then bring them down to cover his head. And then next we're going to fold his legs all the way around like so, slide them down, and then push them flush against the body. And then we rotate this whole section forward, and there we have him in his alternate mode, which is obviously a helicopter. But as Ro-Tor is based as a repaint of Vortex, he is a real helicopter, a Cayman Aerospace SH-2G Super Sea Sprite helicopter, which was also the mode of the GoBot Flip Top, and in a lot of ways Ro-Tor here resembles Flip Top, as he has a similar blue color scheme. Flip Top was reviewed last month on my channel, so it shouldn't take any of you too long to find him. Now, as I was saying earlier, there is a difference between the Japanese car robots and the American robots in disguise. And it boils down to some things on the sides. The Japanese version, instead of a sticker back here, it instead has a black insignia painted onto the side here. Whereas here on the American one, it has a red arrow right here in the midsection that the Japanese one does not have. And of course, that's copied over here on the opposite side. So that'd be something you'd have to watch for. And of course, to add the weaponry to Ro-Tor, all we have to do is take his big cannons and plug them in to the posts here near the back. And of course, the smaller gun can be slid in with a little bit of effort into the front of the nose. And then there you go. You have an attack helicopter. And it matches up well with the same weapons configuration on Vortex. And of course, Ro-Tor also has 3 little wee wheels, so it does allow him to be rolled on the ground. How well does he roll? Not too bad for a helicopter. But of course, as he's also a flying machine, swooshing is a good thing to test, and as you can see, he does swoosh pretty good. So again, not a bad toy. Now let's take a look at his loose parts, and of course the first thing we'll start with is the rotor blade. The one thing that the Wikia fails to mention is a loose part. It is exactly the same one that Vortex uses, save for the color of the plastic at the bottom. Ro-Tor's here is red, whereas Vortex's is green. So it's something to bear in mind. And it is, of course, also, as we've stated before, it is very thin plastic, so please do be careful with how you store this toy. Then, of course, we have his gun, what the Wikia describes as his pistol. It's the exact same one that Vortex had, except Vortex's is green, and was labeled as a semi-automatic glue gun. And then, of course, we have the right and left cannons. Again, they use the same mold, except Vortex had them in dark green, whereas Ro-Tor gets them in red. And as you can see, they are hollow on the opposite side. Otherwise, no real improvements there. As stated last week with Armor Hide's video, we don't really have any tech specs or anything to go by. So instead, we're basically going to jump to my final thoughts. What do I think of Ro-Tor? Well, Ro-Tor really doesn't add anything new or different than what Vortex already did. But the only things we have to go by is the change in personality that's mentioned on the Wikia. Vortex in his Generation 1 day was an interrogator, and he was made somewhat more useful due to the fact that he had more courage at it than Laserbeak, so that made him better at his job. And a fine replacement for Laserbeak, as Laserbeak was discontinued the year Vortex came out. So it felt like a natural progression for the Transformer line. We don't know exactly what Ro-Tor does for the Decepticons. We can surmise by what was stated in the opening paragraphs on the wiki that Ro-Tor seems to be a sniper. And quite possibly more psychotic. He carries on the similar Decepticon tradition of being one of many that can fly, and thus he feels superior to the predominantly ground-based Autobots. So that will be reflected in everything that he does. It's nice that they added more of ninja skills to Ro-Tor as well, by giving him the ability to fight with his rotor blades, something that was never mentioned as being an option for Vortex. So in ways, he is a slight improvement on Vortex, just not really all that much. And with the lack of information that we have on him, that just leaves me to only still keep him in the middle tier. As simply since I really don't have much to go on with him that won't be conflicting. But I do like the improvements that they gave him. It just still isn't enough, really. The toy is still just a repaint of Vortex. The bio at least adds a little bit more to him, but that just makes it an apples to bananas comparison between Ro-Tor and Vortex. And that really isn't fair to either of them. And that concludes my review of the Robots in Disguise Ro-Tor and his comparison to the G1 Combaticon Vortex. If you like this video, please leave me a thumbs up here on YouTube. If you're new to my channel, please hit the subscribe button down below to join our ranks. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you'll be alerted as I post new content, like this comparison we're doing all month. Also, please share your thoughts about Ro-Tor or Vortex in the comments down below. This is Sparkster1701 saying I will catch you all later.